The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of planet Kepler 442b. Dust swirled in the alien wind as Sergeant Blake Rodriguez checked his equipment one final time. 3 years of war had taught him to be careful, to notice every detail that could mean the difference between life and going home in a box. "Movement ahead, 2 clicks northwest," whispered Private Chen through the comm system. The young soldier had sharp eyes, something that had saved their unit more times than Blake could count. Behind them, 4 other soldiers moved like ghosts through the purple-tinged landscape, their boots barely making a sound on the strange crystalline sand. Blake raised his binoculars and scanned the horizon. There, half buried in a crater, lay the twisted remains of what looked like a Zephyrian scout ship. Smoke still rose from its hull and sparks of alien electricity danced across its surface. It was fresh, maybe an hour old at most. "Could be a trap," muttered Corporal Williams, the team's demolitions expert. His weathered face showed the kind of caution that comes from seeing too many friends walk into ambushes. "These blueskins love their games." Blake nodded but kept watching. Something was different about this crash. The ship was too small for a proper military vessel, too fancy for a regular transport. Golden decorations caught the light along its sides, and the metal seemed to shimmer with patterns he'd never seen before. Then she appeared. The ship's hatch opened with a hiss of escaping atmosphere, and out stepped the most unusual Zephyrian any of them had ever seen. She was young, probably in her early 20s if you compared her to human years, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow in the morning light. But what really caught their attention was her armor. It wasn't the standard military gear they'd seen on other Zephyrian soldiers. This was something special, something that looked like it cost more than their entire unit's equipment combined. The armor seemed alive, pulsing with soft lights that followed the lines of her body. Tiny circuits ran like veins across its surface, and when she moved, the whole thing flowed like liquid metal. She stood up straight, brushed imaginary dust from her shoulder plates, and looked around with the kind of confidence that made Blake's stomach tighten. This wasn't fear or panic. This was someone who thought she was still in control. "Well, well," she said in perfect English, her voice carrying easily across the distance. "What do we have here? A collection of primitive apes playing soldier?" Blake signaled his team to spread out, keeping his rifle ready but not aimed directly at her. Years of fighting had taught him to read enemies, and this one was different, dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with weapons. The alien princess, because that's what she had to be, judging by the fancy armor and attitude, began walking toward them with slow, deliberate steps. Each footfall sent little ripples of energy through her suit, and Blake noticed that her boots weren't touching the ground. She was floating, just slightly, held up by some kind of technology he couldn't understand. "You know," she continued, tilting her head like she was examining insects, "I've studied your species extensively. Such fascinating little creatures, fighting so hard for a planet that will never truly be yours. Do you honestly think your crude metal weapons and basic tactics can stand against the might of the Zephyrian Empire?" Private Chen shifted uncomfortably beside Blake, but the sergeant held up a hand to keep him quiet. Let her talk. Information was information, and enemies who liked to hear themselves speak often revealed more than they intended. "I am Princess Zara of House Veltar, daughter of Emperor Threnix, commander of the 3rd Royal Fleet." She paused dramatically, clearly expecting some kind of reaction. When none came, her smile faltered just slightly. "Perhaps you don't understand the significance of that title. Allow me to educate you." She gestured with one armored hand, and a holographic display sprang to life in the air between them. Star maps, battle formations, troop movements, classified human military information that should have been impossible for her to possess. "Your 7th Infantry Division moved through Sector 12 yesterday at 0800 hours, she said casually, watching Blake's face for a reaction. They lost 18 soldiers to our automated defense systems. Such a waste, really. If they had simply surrendered, those brave little humans might still be breathing. Blake felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his expression neutral. She was trying. To get under his skin, to make him angry enough to do something stupid. It was a classic interrogation technique, even if the roles were reversed here. The princess noticed his composure and seemed annoyed by it. No reaction? How disappointingly stoic. Very well, let me try a different approach. The hologram shifted, showing images of human settlements. Your families, your children, your elderly, they huddle in their underground shelters hoping that today won't be the day our ships find them. But we know where they are, Sergeant. We've always known. Now she had his attention, and she knew it. Her smile returned, wider than before. Yes, that's better. I can see the fear in your eyes now. Good, fear is honest, fear is realistic. She began pacing back and forth, her armor making soft humming sounds with each movement. You see, this entire war has been nothing more than an elaborate game for us. A training exercise, if you will. My father wanted me to gain some practical experience in military matters before I take my place in the Imperial Council. What better way than to hunt down the last stubborn remnants of human resistance? Blake studied her armor more carefully while she talked. The technology was incredible, but everything had weaknesses, everything had limits, and something about the way the circuits pulsed, the pattern of lights that ran across its surface, reminded him of systems he'd seen before. Your weapons are pathetic, the princess continued, warming to her subject. Your armor is like paper. Your tactics are so primitive that our war computers solved them within the first week of fighting. Honestly, I'm beginning to wonder if this planet is even worth conquering. Perhaps we should simply sterilize it from orbit and find something more challenging elsewhere? She stopped pacing and looked directly at Blake. But you, Sergeant, there's something different about you, isn't there? You're not cowering like the others should be. You're thinking, planning. How refreshing. Her laugh was like crystalline bells, beautiful and cold. Tell me, what grand strategy is forming in that primitive human brain of yours? Blake finally spoke, his voice calm and measured. I'm thinking about how confident you are for someone whose ship just crashed in enemy territory. The princess waved a dismissive hand. A minor technical malfunction. My rescue team will arrive within the hour. Until then, I thought I might observe you creatures up close. Consider it scientific curiosity. Is that what you call it? Blake asked, taking a step closer. His team tensed, ready for action, but he kept his movements slow and non-threatening. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're scared. For the first time since she'd emerged from the wreck, the princess's confidence cracked just a little. Scared? Of you? That's adorable, really. My armor alone contains more technology than your entire civilization has developed. I am faster, stronger, and infinitely more intelligent than any human could ever hope to be. Blake nodded thoughtfully. Maybe. But you know what I've learned in 3 years of fighting your people? All that fancy technology makes you predictable. You rely on it so much that you forget the most important rule of combat. And what rule is that? She asked, her voice carrying a hint of genuine curiosity despite her disdain. Blake smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Never underestimate your enemy. He looked at her armor again, noting the specific pattern of energy flows, the way certain circuits seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat, especially when that enemy has been studying your technology every single day since this war began. The princess laughed again, but this time it sounded a little forced. Study all you like, primitive. This armor is bonded to my neural pathways, protected by encryption that would take your best computers 1,000 years to crack. You might as well threaten to destroy gravity itself. Gravity? Blake repeated, pulling a small device from his belt. It looked simple, almost crude compared to her gleaming armor, but he handled it with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Funny you should mention that. Because gravity is just another force that can be understood, predicted, and manipulated by anyone smart enough to figure out how. The device in his hand began to emit a soft, pulsing tone. The princess glanced at it dismissively, then did a double take as her armor's lights began to flicker in response. "What is that?" she demanded, her voice losing its mocking tone for the first time. Blake's smile widened. 3 years of studying crashed Zephyrian ships, princess. 3 years of taking apart your people's technology piece by piece. 3 years of learning exactly how your neural interfaces work and what frequencies they operate on. He held up the device. This little crude human invention, it's tuned specifically to disrupt Zephyrian bio-armor connections. The princess's eyes widened as understanding dawned. For the first time since the crash, she looked genuinely afraid. The device in Blake's hand continued its soft pulsing, and Princess Zara's armor responded with increasingly erratic light patterns. She took a step backward, her earlier confidence cracking like ice on a warm day. But instead of surrendering or showing weakness, she did something that caught everyone off guard. She laughed. Not the crystalline, mocking sound from before, but something darker, more dangerous. "Oh, you clever little monkey," she said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "You think you've discovered something important, don't you? You think your primitive gadget can somehow challenge technology that your species won't understand for another 1,000 years?" Blake kept the device steady, watching as her armor's systems flickered between normal operation and obvious distress. "I think 3 years of war has taught us more about your people than you'd like to admit." 3 years? The princess straightened up, and despite the obvious problems with her armor, she seemed to grow more confident rather than less. "You want to know what we've learned about humans in 3 years? Sergeant Blake Rodriguez of the 23rd Engineering Corps, formerly of Detroit, Earth?" Blake's blood went cold. She knew his name. She knew his unit. She knew his hometown. Princess Zara noticed his reaction and smiled with genuine pleasure. "Oh yes, we know all about you. Height, 6 feet 2 inches. Weight, 185 pounds. Born March 15th, 2157. Parents, Maria and Antonio Rodriguez, currently residing in Underground Shelter Complex 7, beneath what used to be called Michigan. Shall I continue?" Private Chen shifted nervously beside Blake, whispering under his breath. "How does she know all that?" The princess heard him and turned her attention to the younger soldier. "Private David Chen, age 22, engineering student, before the war. Your sister Lisa works in the hydroponic farms in Sector 9. Your mother sends you letters every week through the military communication system. She's worried about you, David. She asks the commanders every day if there's been any word from your unit." Chen's face went pale, and Blake saw his hands shake slightly on his rifle. The princess was doing exactly what she'd intended, getting into their heads, making this personal. "Stop," Blake ordered. But Princess Zara was just getting started. "Corporal Williams," she continued, turning to the demolitions expert. "Thomas Williams, age 34, former mining engineer. You joined the military after your wife died in the orbital bombardment of New Sydney. You carry her picture in your left breast pocket and you talk to it when you think nobody's watching." Williams took a step forward, his face flushed with anger, but Blake held up a hand to stop him. This was exactly what she wanted, to make them emotional, to make them careless. "You see," the princess said, beginning to pace again despite her. "Armor's obvious malfunctions. We don't just study your military tactics and weapons. We study you. Every transmission you send, every message home, every personal detail that passes through your communication networks. We know your hopes, your fears, your weaknesses." She paused in front of Blake, close enough that he could see, The intricate details of her face, the way her pale blue skin seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. We know that Sergeant Rodriguez lies awake at night wondering if his parents are still alive. We know that Private Chen dreams about going home and finishing his engineering degree. We know that Corporal Williams blames himself for his wife's death because he was supposed to be there that day. "Enough," Blake said quietly, but his voice carried a warning that made his men stand straighter. "Oh, but I'm just getting to the interesting part," Princess Zara continued. "You see, all of this, your resistance, your desperate little battles, your hope that somehow you can win this war, it's all been carefully managed by us. We could have ended this conflict in the first month if we'd wanted to. Instead, we've been feeding you just enough victories to keep you fighting, just enough hope to prevent you from surrendering completely." She activated another holographic display, this one showing battle statistics, casualty reports, strategic analyses. Every time you thought you dealt us a major blow, every time you celebrated a victory, it was because we allowed it to happen. We needed you to keep fighting so that I could gain practical experience in military command. Blake studied the data, his engineer's mind automatically analyzing the patterns. Something didn't feel right about what she was showing them. The numbers were too clean, too convenient. "Your underground settlements," she continued. "We've known their locations for over a year. Your supply routes, your communication networks, your backup plans. We have detailed maps of everything. The only reason your families are still breathing is because killing them all at once would end the war too quickly for my training purposes." Private Chen made a sound like a wounded animal, and Blake saw several of his other soldiers fighting back emotions. The princess was good at this, he had to admit. She knew exactly how to find the pressure points that would hurt the most. "But here's the truly beautiful part," Princess Zara said, her voice taking on an almost hypnotic quality. "Everything you think you know about our technology, every little advantage you believe you've gained, every clever trick you think you've discovered, we've been feeding that information to you as well." She gestured at the device in Blake's hand, which was still pulsing but seemed to be having less and less effect on her armor. "That fascinating little gadget you're so proud of? We made sure you found the crashed ships that taught you how to build it. We wanted you to have just enough knowledge to be dangerous, just enough capability to provide interesting challenges without ever posing a real threat." Blake felt doubt creeping into his mind. Was she telling the truth? Had their entire resistance effort been nothing more than an elaborate training exercise for an alien princess? The device in his hand suddenly felt heavier, less impressive. "I can see the doubt in your eyes," Princess Zara said with satisfaction. "Good. Doubt is the beginning of wisdom. But let me share one more piece of information with you, something that will really open your eyes to how hopeless your situation truly is." She activated a final hologram, and this one made Blake's heart sink. It showed orbital positions, fleet movements, massive ships moving into position around the planet. "My father has grown impatient with my training exercises," she said casually. "He's given me 2 more days to conclude this phase of my education. After that, the real fleet arrives, and they won't be interested in playing games or taking prisoners. They'll simply sterilize the planet from space and move on to more productive conquests." The numbers on the display were staggering. Hundreds of ships, millions of troops, weapons that could crack continents. "So you see, Sergeant Rodriguez," Princess Zara concluded, "your clever little device, your 3 years of study, your determination and courage, none of it matters. In 48 hours, everything you've ever known will be reduced to glowing ash, and the galaxy will forget that humanity ever existed." Blake looked at his men, saw the despair creeping across their faces. This was the moment when most people would give up, when the weight of impossible odds would crush their spirit. Instead, he smiled. "You know what your biggest mistake was, Princess?" he said, deactivating his device and putting it back on his belt. "You told us we have 48 hours. He looked directly into her alien eyes. A human engineer can accomplish amazing things in 48 hours when he knows exactly what he's working against. Princess Zara stood motionless as her armor continued its systematic shutdown. The soft humming that had accompanied her every movement for years was fading to silence. The gentle pressure against her skin from the bio-neural interfaces was disappearing, piece by piece. For the first time since childhood, she felt truly alone inside her own body. Blake watched her carefully, noting every change in her expression. The arrogance was gone now, replaced by something much more complex. Fear, yes, but also a growing understanding of just how wrong she had been about everything. "The communication array is offline," Blake announced, checking his tablet. "Life. Support is running on emergency power. Mobility systems are disabled. Princess, right now you're wearing about 200 pounds of very expensive metal that can't do anything more impressive than a medieval suit of armor." She tried to speak, to maintain some dignity in defeat, but found that even her voice translator had been disabled. The words that came out were in her native Zephyrian language, musical and flowing, but completely incomprehensible to the humans around her. "Can't understand you anymore," Private Chen said, though not unkindly. "Guess that fancy education didn't include learning human languages the old-fashioned way." Princess Zara's eyes flashed with frustration. She had spent years studying human culture, learning their languages, understanding their psychology, but all of it had been filtered through her armor's translation matrix. Without that technology, she was as lost as any tourist in a foreign land. Blake made some adjustments on his tablet, and suddenly the princess could understand them again. But when she tried to respond, her own words remained in Zephyrian. "I've restored your input translator," Blake explained. "You can understand us, but we can't understand you. Consider it a lesson in perspective." The princess tried to gesture, to communicate through body language, but even that was difficult in the heavy, unpowered armor. Every movement required real effort now, and she quickly discovered muscles she had forgotten existed. The suit that had made her superhuman was now making her less than human. Corporal Williams approached with a field ration and a water bottle. "Figured you might be getting hungry," he said simply, setting them down within her reach. "Can't be easy carrying all that dead weight around." Princess Zara stared at the offered food in confusion. This wasn't how prisoners were supposed to be treated, especially not after everything she had said to them. She had mocked their families, threatened their loved ones, described in detail how her people planned to destroy everything they cared about. Yet here they were, offering her basic kindness. She tried to reach for the water bottle, but her armored hands were too clumsy without power assistance. After several attempts, she looked up at Williams with the expression that clearly asked for help. Williams hesitated for a moment, then carefully helped guide the bottle to her lips. "There you go," he said quietly. "Not exactly royal treatment, but it'll keep you going." The water was warm and tasted of recycling filters, nothing like the perfectly pure liquids she was accustomed to. But it was the first thing she had consumed that hadn't been processed and enhanced by her armor's life support systems. It tasted real in a way she had forgotten was possible. As the hours passed, Princess Zara found herself observing the human soldiers with new eyes. Without her armor's constant stream of tactical data and threat assessments, she had to rely on her own senses to understand what was happening around her. Blake and his team worked with quiet efficiency, setting up defensive positions and communication. Equipment. They didn't bark orders or waste motion. Each person seemed to know exactly what needed to be done and did it without drama or complaint. It was nothing like the rigid hierarchy and formal protocols she was used to in Zephyrian military units. Private Chen shared some of his ration with a wounded soldier who had arrived with another patrol. Nobody ordered him to do it. He simply noticed the man looked hungry and acted. Corporal Williams used his explosives expertise to clear debris from a communication line, even though it wasn't technically his job. These humans helped each other instinctively, without calculation or expectation of reward. Your people work together differently than mine do, Princess Zara said in Zephyrian, knowing they couldn't understand but needing to say it anyway. Blake looked up from his equipment. Talking to yourself, Princess? That's either a good sign or a bad one? She gestured at the soldiers around them, then at herself, trying to communicate through movement what she couldn't say in words they would. Understand. You're wondering why we're not treating you the way you treated us, Blake said, reading her expression with surprising accuracy. That's a fair question. The simple answer is that we're not you. He set down his tablet and came over to sit on a nearby rock, close enough to talk without shouting, but far enough away to avoid making her feel threatened. 3 years ago, when your people first arrived, a lot of us wanted revenge. We wanted to hurt you the way you hurt us. Some of our leaders actually suggested doing exactly what you did, capturing your people and making them suffer. Princess. Zara listened intently, studying his face as he spoke. But here's the thing about humans, Blake continued. We're stubborn in ways your people never understood. We don't just survive. We choose how we survive. We could have become monsters, to fight monsters, but that would have meant your people won even if we defeated them. They would have turned us into something we didn't want to be. He gestured at his soldiers, busy with their work. These people have lost everything. Families, homes, entire worlds. They have every right to hate your people, to want revenge. Instead, they chose to remain human. They chose to be better than their enemies. The princess looked around at the faces of the soldiers, seeing them clearly for the first time. These weren't the savage primitives she had been taught to expect. They were people who had faced the worst imaginable circumstances and somehow maintained their humanity through it all. You know what the real difference is between your people and mine? Blake asked. Power. Your people have so much power that you've forgotten what it means to be vulnerable. You've forgotten what it's like to need other people, to depend on kindness instead of strength. Princess Zara tried to stand, wanting to pace as she always did when thinking, but the unpowered armor made it nearly impossible. She was trapped in her own skin, forced to sit still and simply think without the constant distractions of data feeds and system alerts. For the first time in years, her mind was quiet, and in that quiet, she began to understand things that had never occurred to her before. The way her soldiers followed orders out of fear rather than respect, the way her people conquered rather than cooperated, the way she herself had treated others as inferior rather than different. Blake's tablet chimed softly, and he checked the display. Looks like we've got incoming signals from your fleet, he announced. They'll be here in about 36 hours. That gives us time to prepare a proper welcome. Princess Zara looked at him with an expression that might have been curiosity or concern. She couldn't tell them what she was thinking, couldn't warn them about the true strength of the approaching fleet. But as she watched these humans prepare to face impossible odds with quiet determination, she found herself hoping they would survive what was coming, even if it meant her own people would lose. The next 30 hours passed differently than any time Princess Zara had ever experienced. Without her armor's constant information feeds, time moved at a natural pace. She watched the sun cross the alien sky, felt the temperature change as evening approached, noticed small details about the world around her that had always been filtered through layers of technology. Blake's team worked around the clock, but they didn't ignore her. Chen brought her food regularly, though eating with armored hands remained a clumsy challenge. Williams showed her how to adjust her position to reduce the strain on her back from the heavy, unpowered suit. Even Blake himself took time to check on her condition, making sure she wasn't developing pressure sores or circulation problems. Why? She asked in Zephyrian during one of these visits, looking directly at Blake with a question in her eyes that transcended language barriers. Blake seemed to understand what she was asking. Because it's the right thing to do, he said simply. Your people might not see the value in that, but it's what makes us human. As the hours progressed, Princess Zara began to notice things about human behavior that her cultural training had never prepared her for. When Chen received a message from his sister through the military communication system, he immediately shared the good news with everyone around him. His family was safe, the hydroponic farms were producing well, and his mother had sent her love to his entire unit. "She says to tell you all that you're in her prayers," Chen announced, grinning broadly. "Even the Zephyrian prisoner, apparently. Mom says anyone who's stuck eating our field rations deserves sympathy." The soldiers laughed, and several of them actually looked at Princess Zara with something approaching warmth. This baffled her completely. In Zephyrian culture, sharing personal information was a sign of weakness, and showing concern for enemies was unthinkable. Yet these humans seemed to do both naturally. Williams was different from the others, quieter and more serious, but she noticed him talking to the photograph he carried. "Day 1247, Katie," she heard him whisper during one of his quiet moments. "Looks like we might actually have a chance to win this thing. Can you believe it? Your old demolitions expert might actually help save the world." Princess Zara realized that he was speaking to his deceased wife, keeping her memory alive through daily conversations. In Zephyrian society, the dead were honored but quickly forgotten, considered irrelevant to current concerns. The idea of maintaining an emotional connection to someone who couldn't respond or provide benefit was completely foreign to her. But watching Williams find comfort and strength in that connection, she began to understand that humans drew power from different sources than her people did. As the final hours approached, Blake made a decision that surprised everyone, including his own team. He reactivated Princess Zara's vocal translator, allowing her to speak in English again. "Thank you," were her first words, and they came out much quieter than her earlier proclamations. "Seemed like you had things you wanted to say," Blake replied. "Figured it was time to listen." Princess Zara looked around at the soldiers who had spent 30 hours treating her with basic dignity, despite everything she had done to them. "I need to tell you something about the fleet that's coming. Something that might help you." Blake raised an eyebrow. "Information freely given? That's new." "The command ship," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "The one carrying my father and the main battle coordinators. It has the same bio-neural interface systems as my armor. If your techniques work on a larger scale—" "You're telling us how to attack your own people?" Williams asked, clearly skeptical. Princess Zara met his gaze steadily. "I'm telling you how to survive. There's a difference." She paused, choosing her words carefully. 3 days ago, I thought you were all primitives who deserve to be conquered. Now I've seen how you treat prisoners, how you care for each other, how you face impossible odds without losing your humanity. If my people win this war, they'll destroy something valuable that they don't even understand." Blake studied her face, looking for deception or manipulation. "And if we win, what happens to you?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I can't go back to being who I was before, but maybe I can help both our peoples find a better way forward." The sound of approaching ships filled the air, deep thrums of power that made the ground vibrate. Blake's tablet showed massive energy signatures entering the planet's atmosphere, the Zephyrian fleet arriving exactly on schedule. "Last chance to change your mind, Princess," Blake said as he made final preparations to his equipment. "Once this starts, there's no going back." Princess Zara looked at the approaching ships that carried her father, her people, everything she had once called home. Then she looked at the humans who had shown her what strength really meant. "Send the signal," she said firmly. "Target the command ship's neural interface array at coordinates 847.3 terahertz, exactly like you did with my armor. I'll provide real-time targeting data." Blake nodded and activated his systems. Across the planet, hidden human installations powered up with technology that combined 3 years of desperate innovation with captured Zephyrian science. The hunters had indeed become the hunted, but the final lesson was just beginning. As the first Zephyrian ships began experiencing system failures, Princess Zara felt a strange sensation she had never experienced before. For the first time in her life, she was choosing her own path rather than following orders or expectations. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. The battle that followed would be remembered by both species for generations. But the real victory had already been won in a small crater on an alien world, where a princess learned what it meant to be human, and a group of soldiers proved that humanity was worth preserving. When Emperor Threnix's ship was forced to land for emergency repairs with its systems completely compromised by human technology, he found his daughter waiting for him, not as a prisoner or a traitor, but as a bridge between two worlds that had forgotten how to talk instead of fight. "Father," Princess Zara said as he emerged from his crippled vessel, "there are some people I'd like you to meet. They have some interesting ideas about cooperation that I think you should hear." Blake stepped forward, no longer the desperate soldier fighting for survival, but a representative of a species that had proven itself worthy of respect. "Your Majesty," he said, with a slight bow, "welcome to Earth. We have a lot to discuss." The war was over. The conversation was just beginning. The morning sun was already getting hot when Jake wiped his dirty hands on an old rag. His small boat repair shop sat right by the water, and he could smell the salt air mixed with engine oil. At 32 years old, Jake had been fixing boats for almost 15 years. He liked working with his hands better than talking to people most days. Jake had learned the hard way that people could let you down, but machines were honest. If something was broken, you could see it. If you fixed it right, it would work. No lies, no broken promises, just simple truth. That's why he spent most of his time alone in his shop, surrounded by boat engines and spare parts. His divorce 2 years ago had left him feeling like a fool. His ex-wife had taken half of everything and moved to the city with her new boyfriend. Jake decided he didn't need all that drama anymore. He had his work, his small house by the marina, and his peace of mind. That was enough. The afternoon was quiet until he heard voices outside. Jake looked up from the engine he was working on and saw 2 young women walking toward his shop. They looked exactly the same, like they were twins. Both had long dark hair and were wearing simple white clothes. There was something different about them, something that made Jake stop what he was doing and really look. They walked in a way that seemed almost like they were floating. Their skin looked perfect, like they had never spent a day in the sun. When they got closer, Jake could see their eyes were the darkest brown he had ever seen, almost black. They looked worried. "Excuse me," one of them said in English that sounded a little strange. She spoke clearly, but there was an accent Jake couldn't place. "Are you the mechanic who fixes boats?" "That's me," Jake said, putting down his wrench. "What can I do for you?" The other twin stepped forward. "My name is Luna, and this is my sister Nova. Our boat broke down in the ocean. The Coast Guard brought us here. They said you might be able to help us." Jake had heard about the Coast Guard tow that morning. Word traveled fast in a small marina town. "What kind of boat is it?" "It's different," Nova said, looking at her. "Sister. Other mechanics said they couldn't fix it. You're our last hope." There was something in the way she said it that made Jake curious. In all his years fixing boats, he had never met an engine he couldn't figure out. "Let me take a look." "Where is it?" The twins led him down to the far end of the marina where the Coast Guard had tied up their boat. When Jake saw it, he stopped walking and just stared. The boat was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was about 30 feet long, but shaped in a way that looked more like it belonged in space than in the ocean. The hull was smooth and white, with no visible joints or seams. It looked like it had been carved from one giant piece of some material Jake didn't recognize. There were no visible bolts, screws, or welds anywhere. The windows were tinted so dark he couldn't see inside. "What in the world is this thing?" Jake asked, walking around the boat slowly. It's from our homeland, Luna said quietly. We live on a small island very far from here. Our people build things differently. Jake had traveled to many places when he was younger, working on different kinds of boats. He had fixed everything from old wooden fishing boats to million-dollar yachts, but this was completely new to him. Can you open the engine compartment? He asked. Nova pressed her hand against what looked like a solid part of the hull. Suddenly, a section of the boat opened up like it was alive. Jake's mouth fell open. Inside, he could see machinery that looked like it came from the future. The engine wasn't like any marine engine he knew. Instead of the usual big diesel or gas engine, there were smooth metal boxes connected by cables that seemed to glow with a soft blue light. Everything was clean and quiet. There was no smell of oil or gas. How does this thing work? Jake asked, leaning in for a closer look. We don't really know, Nova admitted. At home, machines fix themselves. We've never had to learn how they work. We just use them. Luna nodded. When something breaks, we usually just get a new one. But we're so far from home, and this is our only way back to our family. Jake could hear the worry in their voices. Whatever island they came from, it must be really far away if they couldn't just call for help. He looked at the strange engine again. It was like nothing he had ever seen, but that just made it more interesting. I can't promise anything, Jake said finally. This is way different from what I usually work on, but I'll try my best. Both twins smiled at the same time, and Jake felt something warm in his chest. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at him like he was their hero. Thank you, Luna said. We'll pay you well for your help. How long do you think it will take? Nova asked. Jake scratched his head. Hard to say. I need to figure out how this thing even works first. Could be days, could be weeks. You got somewhere to stay? The twins looked at each other with concern. We didn't plan for a long stay, Luna said. There's a small hotel in town, Jake offered. Mrs. Chen runs it. She's nice and won't charge you too much. As the sun started to set, Jake found himself thinking about the strange boat and the two mysterious women. He had always prided himself on being able to fix anything, but this would be his biggest challenge yet. Something told him his quiet, simple life was about to get a lot more complicated.